Hi, welcome to my chemistry intro. We're going to be talking about some basic concepts to get you started on your path to learning chemistry. We're not going to go too in deep. We're going to talk about basic things like atoms, molecules, matter, compounds, and chemical reactions. So to start the topic off, I'd like to tell you at least my opinion in what chemistry is. Chemistry has many definitions. Some people think it's just the chemical reactions, some think it's the study between ions, molecules, and atoms, which it's all of those things. But there's something that a lot of people don't actually mention, and I think it's important information to learn before you really want to understand what chemistry is. Well, why does chemistry even happen in the first place? Well, I'm sure you guys have heard about physics before. Physics. The laws of physics is the reason that chemistry can even exist in the first place. Chemistry is only allowed to be the way it is because of the way physics works. So, we want to understand that before there was chemistry, there was physics. Physics made chemistry what it is, and chemistry makes biology what it is. So it's kind of a ladder. At the bottom of the ladder, there's physics. Midway to the ladder, there's chemistry, and then at the top of the ladder, there's biology. Biology makes us what we are, chemistry makes up that biology, and physics allows that chemistry to happen. So let's talk and start talking about matter and then mass and volume as well. So I know I just threw a lot of words at you, so let's break it down one by one. So first, let's talk about matter, then we can talk about mass and volume. What is matter? Well, matter is just stuff. If you are sitting in your room right now and you see a desk, a chair, a bed, a closet, notice how it's taking up space in your room. That is what matter is. It's made up of matter. It's taking up stuff on this physical existence. So that's a basic way of describing matter. Now, matter can exist in 3 different states as well. And what chemistry can explain is why it exists in these different states. Why do you sometimes have a block of ice? Why do you sometimes have water? And why do you have gas? Well, you're going to learn those reasons. I'm not going to tell them to you now because you're going to figure it out later. And it's all going to make sense. But what I can tell you is that matter has to do with mass and volume, and matter is made up of atoms. So now we're going to break up all of what we just said. So here's a picture that I found that describes volume and mass in simple terms. Now, what is volume? Volume is the amount of space something takes up. So if you compared an ant to an elephant doesn't really take up that much space. It's very small. But an elephant, that takes up a lot more space. So simply, volume is just in regards to the amount of space something's taking up, not regarding, how heavy it is. Now, when we want to talk about how heavy something is, we're talking about mass. Now, of course, in the volume picture, the mass of an elephant is going to be a lot more than the mass of an ant, just by sheer volume. But if we're going to talk about how much matter an object has, then we're talking about its mass. That's essentially all mass is the amount of atoms that are in that object, that fill up that object. I want you to think about something. Think about a basketball and a bowling ball. They're the same amount of volume. They kind of take up the same amount of space because a basketball and a bowling ball are somewhat of a similar size. But look at the difference in mass and the difference of how heavy a bowling ball is from a basketball. You know, basketballs inside are hollow, so there's a lot of open room with no matter. And then you look into a bowling ball, and there's a ton of matter because it's not hollow. So that means it has more mass. So that's a basic understanding of volume versus mass. So now that we have a good understanding of what mass, volume, and matter is, we can actually talk what matter is made up of. Matter is made up of this very, very, very small particle called an atom. Now, an atom has subatomic parts that make up what an atom actually is. Now, an atom has a center. The center is called a nucleus, and that nucleus is made up of two subatomic particles, a proton and a neutron. So what is a proton? Well, a proton is a positively charged particle. What is a neutron? Well, that's a neutrally charged particle, hence neutral. And then outside of this nucleus, there's something that's orbiting it. Remember in Jimmy Neutron that you've seen an atom in Jimmy Neutron, and you see that thing that's orbiting around that atom. That's an electron. The mobile part of an atom, the moving part in an atom, is an electron. And a lot of chemical reactions happen because of electrons, because electrons can move. A proton and a neutron is not going to move. It's going to stay seated in the nucleus. This is a basic understanding of what an atom is. And now, if a proton and neutron have their charges, well, neutron doesn't have a charge, excuse me, what's the charge of an electron? Electrons have negative charge. And we're going to talk about all of this charge stuff a bit later, but this is a basic introduction to an atom. Now, let's talk about the periodic table of elements. I'm sure you guys have seen this in almost every scientific classroom you've ever walked in, and you definitely have. You probably have seen this before, and if you haven't, that's fine. You're going to be introduced to this. This is what life is made up of. Everything you see here makes up everything that you've ever seen in your life. Even you, the human being, are made up of 4 abundant elements. And I'll tell you what those elements are. You have the majority of it being made up of hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, and nitrogen. There's calcium and phosphorus as well, but those are the main ones. So humans are made up of elements, just like everything else. So what are elements? Well, elements are what make up matter. If matter is stuff, what actually makes up that stuff? That stuff is made up of elements. So now you have an understanding. The primary constituents of matter are elements. Now, elements are types of atoms, but they're not all the same, and you're going to learn how to differentiate them just by looking at this table. But what I want to tell you is that these elements are atoms, and these atoms all have different numbers of protons and electrons, which give them their distinctive properties. But to give you guys just a quick definition, all an element is something, it's a pure substance. It can't be broken down into anything else. It's pure. And this is what makes up matter. It's what makes up life itself. Now, I'm going to be talking about molecules now. Now, the difference between a molecule and a compound is a bit more complex. And I want to go over both molecule and compounds. But to understand the differences would mean you need to understand something about chemistry bonds. And I'm going to hope that next lecture I might start talking about the bonds, or I might start talking about the periodic table. But I'm going on a bit of a tangent here. Let me tell you what a molecule is. So, a molecule is when there is a molecular bond between 2 atoms. Now, these 2 atoms are hydrogen atoms. Now, this kind of molecule is called a diatomic molecule because it's made up of 2 atoms of the exact same type. Now, these 2 atoms are both hydrogen atoms. These hydrogen atoms can bond to each other. This is chemistry. Chemistry explains what is going on between these 2 hydrogens. Now, 2 hydrogen bonding makes up a pretty important compound that life cannot exist without. I think you guys can see where I'm going here. Now I'm going to tell you guys about compounds in the next slide. So now I'm going to explain to you guys what a compound is. In the previous slide, we talked about a molecule, and the way we defined a molecule was a molecule, or a diatomic molecule, is a molecule made from two atoms that are the same. Hydrogen is the same, so you have two hydrogens, they connect to each other from a bond, that makes up a molecule. Now you can kind of guess what a compound is. A compound is when, what about if it's not just hydrogen? What about if there's a different element there as well? Well, that's how you get water. That's why water exists. Because water is formed as a compound. Because it's not just a bonding between the same elements, it's a bonding between two different elements, oxygen and hydrogen. So that's essentially what a compound is. And now, to end the lecture, this is the end of the lecture, I'm going to tell you guys just one thing. Water is a molecule, and it's a compound. That sounds extremely confusing, and I know it does. But there's one thing. The definition between molecule and compound isn't just in the elements, it's also in the bonds between the elements. And that's what I want to go over next time. Next time, I want to go into chemical bonds. I think chemical bonds are extremely important. Now, I might want to start with the periodic table of elements. Maybe we'll do that, and then the chemical bonds. But keep in mind that water is a molecule and a compound. And the answer to that question, you're going to find that out. And I hope you notice. And I'll definitely bring it up. Anyways, this is the end of Chemistry 1. This is the first lecture, and there'll be many, many more. Thank you for watching, and I hope you learned something.